My friend and I carpool to and from work together every day. It was late at night and I was waiting for her to come pick me up when her cousin drove past and told me she was running late, and had asked if he could come pick me up, so I wouldn't have to wait so long alone. I met her cousin only once, very briefly at a wedding she had dragged me to a few months back. He seemed nice, then and now, so I agreed. I was about to step into the car, but then I realized I had left my purse inside my work. I told him I would be 2 seconds to go grab it. I went back into work and grabbed my purse. My phone rang. It was my friend. She said she was on her way to come pick me up. Confused, I reminded her that she had asked her cousin to pick me up. Silence. She only has one cousin, and he was on a missionary trip in another country, WTF. Turns out, this guy had been memorizing every detail of my life and schedule, and knew I waited for my friend every night to pick me up. He dressed up as my friend's cousin, because he knew I wouldn't be afraid of him because I had met him, but I didn't know him well enough to realize it wasn't him. The cops, after a long chase, caught him. He had previously murdered 3 other women, and in the back of his car were poisons, guns, chains, knives, ropes, and masks. My cousin and I were working a summer job together as teenagers at his dad's machine shop in Houston. We were walking home from work one day and passed over some train tracks at a busy intersection. A man walked past us down the tracks and we all did the little head nod greeting and kept on our way. A few days later I was watching the evening news and saw that the railroad killer had been caught. It was the same guy we saw on the tracks. I called my cousin and told him to turn on the news. He started freaking out and his parents wouldn't believe that we saw him until I confirmed it. Not me but my half-sister. When she was in middle school she was walking home from school and a guy in an old pickup truck offered her a ride home. She said no, because our dad had always said never accept a ride from strangers. A few weeks later, a girl went missing from her class. They found her body sometime later. They later caught the guy, who turned out to be Michael Ross. All in all he assaulted and took the lives of somewhere around 8 young girls in the CT area. He'd later get the death sentence. From what she's told me, our dad and her mother tried to keep the details of the trial away from her at home, trying not to freak out their young daughter. She said, however, the first time she caught a glimpse of his mug shot she recognized him immediately as the man who offered her a ride. My father-in-law was involved in the music scene in the late 60s and went to a party where he met Charles Manson. He said he was leaving with a friend to go get cigarettes when Charles came up and started talking to him. My father-in-law was wearing a cross around his neck and he said Charles reached out and grabbed it and kind of twirled it around his fingers and asked him if he knew who Jesus Christ was. Needless to say, they didn't go back after getting their cigarettes, and he said when he heard about the murders he wasn't too surprised. A family friend was a 20-something and living in Seattle in the mid-1970s. She and a friend were walking home from a bar one night and her friend had to run back to grab his wallet, so she was waiting for him on the sidewalk. She says a man in an old white VW Beetle pulled up and tried to get her to come in so he could give her a ride home. It was dark and she didn't get a good look at him, but she told me she had a bad gut feeling about it and refused. Her friend walked up and the guy in the car immediately sped away. Apparently that encounter stuck out in her mind, and years later, she found out about Ted Bundy. Obviously she can't prove it, but she strongly suspects that she would have been one of his earlier victims had she gotten in that car. A man came to my grandma's house and said he was having car trouble, asked to borrow a wrench. He followed my grandma into her garage and picked up a hammer and whacked her in the back of the head with it. He thought she had died, her skull cracked open. He just left her there, she lived in the middle of the woods. But she didn't die. He was caught before he murdered anyone else, and investigators found all kinds of evidence of him stalking her before coming to kill her. In the months before this, she noticed strange things out of place, the sink left dripping, doors open, unfamiliar smells, etc. But then, when she washed the outfits that were on her doll collection, she noticed tears and holes in them and slits ripped into the doll bodies. She immediately changed the locks. He stabbed her dolls. Then she came home to a break a while later. They only stole one thing, an old Boy Scout pin that her father frequently wore. She looked at it from time to time. It had huge sentimental, but no monetary, value. Turns out it was him the whole time. No one knows exactly how long he had stalked her. He had stalked and killed 2 others in the next town over before coming to my grandma. Came close to being kidnapped. I know it. The police in my town know it. I have gone on walks at all times of day and night since I was about 15 or 16. My town is small and safe, but I learned after this particular incident that even the smallest, sleepiest of towns aren't completely safe. It still gives me anxiety thinking about this night, specifically what may have happened, too much. It was only about 6 o'clock, but since it was December, it was already dark. I had just gotten an MP3 player for Christmas, and I loved listening to music and just walking around near my neighborhood. I was just coming down the road to my house when I noticed a car coming around the curve. I normally would look back at any car coming, even if I was on the sidewalk. I don't know why I didn't this time. But it was going very slowly, and I've been asked by completely well-meaning people who live around here if I needed a ride, so I was assuming they were gearing up to roll down the window and ask if I needed a ride. They never asked. I kept walking, got to the spot where the sidewalk ends because my road has a large chunk where there just isn't one, so you're forced to walk at the side of the road or the grass. We're just barely at the edge of town. The automobile, it was either a dark blue or black Jeep, pulled over to the side of the road. 2 men got out and began following me down the road. If you've never experienced anything like this, I have no idea how universal this is, but all I can describe is a surge of adrenaline and some sort of primal instinct. One that just knows things. I knew, somehow, that if I were to take off running, they would chase me. I don't know how or why, but I knew, and I still know that's how it would have went down. I was analyzing so much so quickly. The running and chasing wouldn't work in my favor because the stretch of road back home was probably a good 50 to 100 feet. I thought about diving into the fence-line/field that is adjacent to my yard, but I realized that would hinder me more than help me. They'd catch me, probably before I made it that far. I realized my only hope was to keep calm and keep an eye on them. I kept turning back to glance at them, and they just kept maintaining eye contact every time I turned to look. I kept walking. Kept calm. But terrified. My house was right there. I would have been snatched up basically right outside it that I prayed for a car to come by. It almost felt like fate or divine intervention when, no sooner did I silently have the thought/prayer for a car, one came around the curve at the very far end of the road from the direction I was walking. The guys dove into the bushes at the edge of the neighbor's driveway. They were so obvious that they were up to no good. I remember having the thought that my situation was super similar to the scene in Twilight where Bella prays for a car to come or whatever and a car does, and she's grateful. I know, weird thing to think when you're in that situation, but that's just how it goes. So, the car passes, it leaves the area, and I'm wondering how the hell I'm going to manage, because I'm still a ways from my yard. My uncle was just leaving my house on his bike at that exact moment. He rides up, and I flag him down. He starts to say bye, and I'm just like, there are two guys in the bushes right now following me. He looks, and they're poking their heads out. He calmly tells me to hurry up and get home. I don't need to be told, honestly. He sits there and keeps an eye on me until I'm in the yard and safe. I go in and tell my mom, and she sees right as they pull out and drive through the cemetery nearby, which is closed and off-limits past dusk. They then take off. My uncle calls as soon as he gets home and asks me if I noticed that there was a third guy coming up from behind on the sidewalk. I said no, I'd only seen the two guys. There had apparently been a third coming up, but I couldn't see him because it was so dark, since there used to be a large gap between streetlights right in that stretch of road that my mom called the cops, and they came out. They told me I did an excellent job getting descriptions of the automobile and the people I did see, since normally people panic and can't recall details. I was just frustrated I never saw a license plate, but the Jeep was behind me and I didn't get a chance to look long enough for that. They agreed that the guys were definitely after me, but nothing ever came of it. They kept an eye out in the area and kept an eye out for a dark-colored Jeep, but I never saw it again. I'm sitting here trembling now, Can't tell if it's because the AC is on and I'm cold, or because recalling this story is always kind of nerve-wracking, because my mind wanders to a lot of what-ifs, but it definitely felt like I had some guardian angel or some shit that kept throwing obstacles in the way for these creepy men. I was actually so afraid to walk down that stretch of road at night for a long time afterward, and sometimes I still can't do it.